Good evening and welcome to the 2025 Last Lecture event. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kurt Kemper, Professor of History and the Director of the General Beadle Honors Program here at Dakota State University. The last lecture is balloted in the spring semester of every year, with the honors students selecting from all faculty who are retiring in that term. Some years we don't have an eligible faculty member, and some years the students have voted not to honor a lecturer, but either way, the decision is that of the students. Tonight, we celebrate Gabe Mydland and his 27 years of service to DSU. With tonight's lecture, Gabe joins an exclusive club which admits only one new member a year and sometimes not even then. Preceding him are Ethel Bean, inaugurating our lecture in 2017, followed by Sue Conover, Wayne Pauli, Jack Walters, and most recently, Gary Garner 2 years ago. It is an event that can be found on many campuses, though a quick Google search shows that not as many campuses have succeeded in maintaining their series. The concept originated in 2007 when Carnegie Mellon University's well-respected computer science professor Randy Pausch announced he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. His students and colleagues urged him to give a valedictory address before his health robbed him of the opportunity. And what now has 21 million views on YouTube, Professor Pausch delivered his famous last lecture, Achieving Your Childhood Dreams, to a standing room only lecture hall only a few months before his death. The premise of the last lecture is simple. What would you say if you had one last lecture to give, one last lesson to offer? Would you make us cry? Would you make us laugh? Would you inspire us, incite us, or provoke us? What would you do with one last platform? The last lecture at DSU is selected by a vote of the honor students, and all faculty and career instructors are eligible, but only in the year they retire. Tonight also happens to mark the latest date on the calendar that the last lecture has ever been held here at DSU. So depending on what Gabe has scheduled for class tomorrow, this may actually be his last lecture. It is an opportunity that is, by design, one in which the lecturer is without constraint. They are free to humor, to offend, to infuriate, to issue a call to arms or a mea culpa, to warn us of dangers not yet realized or repent for sins now regretted. Gabe has none of those.
I feel the power.
Tonight's lecture is entitled, How Did We Get Here? And How Can We Get to a Better Place? Gabe Mydland began his career in statewide politics before pursuing a PhD in psychology, and I will leave to you to draw your own assumptions about the possible causative relationship between those two. Nonetheless, he arrived at DSU in 1998 and set about pursuing a career single-mindedly aimed at students and their success. Now, higher education often talks about student-centered, or we speak of a student-centric teaching approach, but I think for most of us, that's simply industry jargon casually thrown about in the same way we use phrases like growth mindset, faculty governance, and data-driven. But for Gabe, it is a North Star. Gabe has devoted his time here at DSU to teaching and advising, and to service that directly impacts the undergraduate experience. I'm reasonably certain Gabe has never been on the parking committee just to ensure that he has the choicest parking spot at Kennedy Center. But in focusing on teaching and service, Gabe chose to forsake an academic career that focused on discipline in his research. It will likely come as a surprise to many of us who have looked up to Gabe for his leadership and often waited for his wise counsel before forming our own opinions, that not only does he remain an associate professor, he's never even applied for the rank of full professor because he knew his strengths lay elsewhere. And that devotion to the other side of the professoriate has paid dividends, not just in the countless students who he has taught and influenced, but also in recognition from his colleagues who have twice recognized him with the Faculty Award for Excellence in Service and numerous nominations for excellence in teaching. Gabe is one of the few on campus whose voice can match my own in terms of volume, but unlike me, he has an inside voice, and he's also smart enough to allow others to offer their input before his. Most faculty members, me included, look at committee service with the same kind of discernment that a fifth grader looks at his vegetable options. We usually seek out the least unpleasant choice available, but not Gabe. He has willingly served on the ones that involve the most work, curriculum, the least pleasant, academic integrity, and the flat out ugly, assessment. For many of us here on campus, not in the College of Ed, it has been on committee assignments that we have come to know and respect Gabe's value to the university. I first got to know Gabe when he agreed to serve on the Honors Faculty Advisory Committee that helps me run the honors program. Gabe's influence on the program can be seen in many places, but perhaps none more than his insistent pushback against a former provost that our honors admissions process not be overly selective. In Gabe's words, if a student wanted to take on the challenge of the honors program, they should be encouraged, not discouraged, to do so. Finally, while Gabe is quick to self-deprecate and imply that he's just a humble old psych professor, he, like so many of the list of our previous last lecturers, is willing to speak up and call BS when it is needed. He has always been one of the voices of conscience around here to acknowledge when we are headed down a road that is not in the best interests of the university, and it is a voice that has made us better and will be missed. Professor Mydland, won't you teach us one more time?
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, I'd really like to meet the person who Kurt was talking about, because I don't think that's me. You honor me. I would like to thank the Honors Committee for inviting me to share some things with you. I'd like to introduce, though, some family and friends. My wife, Cindy, of 40 years, our daughter, Kate, who's my pride and joy, and then there's my sister-in-law, Cindy's sister, Kathy, and our friend, Taylor. So please welcome them. You know, they talk about, in polite conversation, about how it's impolite to talk about two things, religion and politics. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about religion. I am going to talk about politics, but I don't want you to think that I'm going to try to convince you to join the team I'm on. I'm here to talk about what's going on. And I know that there are a lot of us who are just bewildered. In 100 days, we could be so different. Rest assured, again, I'm not going to try to convince you to join my team, but I do hope that I can convince you that it's going to take all of us together working to get to that better place. And I'm confident we can get there. First, I'd like to quote from a favorite historian. Extremism, racism, nativism, and isolationism. They're all driven by the fear of the unknown. They tend to spike in periods of economic and social stress, a period like our own. That was a quote from someone who I've really grown to admire, John Meekum. At one time, he was the editor of Newsweek magazine, and he since decided to move away from journalism and move into history. He wrote those words in 2018, in the second year of the first term of our current president. Lately, it seems like every time we turn around, there's another controversy that people are talking about, are discouraged about, are upset about. And it seems like nothing ever gets resolved. It's a depressing outlook. It's a bleak outlook. It's like things are beyond our ability to manage. There are arguments, for example, about immigration. Those who say that we need more vigorous border control. We need to deport more people who have come here not in the legal sense. More limits on how we can legally limit who and when they can come into our country. While others argue that there should be more opportunities for people to come here legally, and that they should be more ways that they can obtain citizenship and join us in this experiment we call democracy. Another issue that really preoccupies my time is gun control. There are those who believe that they have a constitutional right for the ownership of firearms, and that responsible gun ownership is critical for their own self-defense, while others will argue equally as passionate that we could have prevented a lot of mass shootings with some regulation about what kinds of weapons are available and who they are available to. And political polarization. Wow. It's something now that we've grown to expect. Republicans dissing Democrats, Democrats insulting Republicans. It's got even worse. People within the same party are arguing with each other. We're talking about how we feel we're right and they're wrong. One of the biggest concerns that I share with many others is the number of people who have become so disgusted, so weary, and consequently so apathetic. They believe there's nothing they can do to make a difference, and they don't want to get involved because it's such an ugly fight. It's such a hard argument. And now, more so than ever before, many of us are getting information from sources, news, from people who seemingly agree with us, which is some degree of solace in this really stressful time, that there are other people who share our viewpoints, but we're missing and ignoring what other people are proposing. This limits our ability to hear, see, and learn about alternative ideas, arrangements, and ways of achieving solutions to the issues that we all face. So, what can we do? How can we turn things around? How can we begin to work and respect each other? Is it always going to be like this? And I can say confidently, no, it's not. It's not always going to be like this. We will return to a period of cooperation, mutual respect, and work together to accomplish things that right now just seem way beyond our reach. Despite the apathy, despite the polarization, and listening to only things that we seem to agree with, I believe there are reasons we can be optimistic. And I'd like to share some of those ideas with you. First, I sincerely believe that each and every one of us are inherently good. We want to make good choices. We want to take the high road. There are people out there who are manipulative, who are dangerous, and sometimes act in evil ways. But my notion is that by default, we all start wanting to do the right thing, good things, for our families, for our friends, as well as our neighbors. Another thing that gives me optimism is that I believe to be true about most people. We don't argue about the big things. There's a lot of agreement. We have to change some things to make this a better place, more efficient. We tend to get into disagreements, quibble, argue, fight over the little things. These details become the focal point. They become consuming. They become distracting, and they become frustrating. Eventually, we begin to see those who we disagree, we see them as flawed. We see them as wrong. We see them as misguided, and even worse. Finally, I believe there's something that we all share that is going to help us move to a better place, and that's that we're all very curious. We are curious about how things work. We're curious about how to get something to work even better, how it worked in the past and what didn't work. We're also very curious about where we're going and what it's going to be like. I want to propose that curiosity can help us rediscover how we share many of the same goals and objectives, and how shared curiosity reminds us that each of us is good and that each of us wants to do the right thing. Through curiosity, I believe we can learn and realize there are good answers that do surprise us, that we hadn't considered, and that we didn't anticipate or even think was a possibility. So, with the goal of moving in a positive direction, I want to encourage everybody in this room and the people who are listening to this. Why they do that, I don't know. And I don't know why you're here. But I want to encourage everyone to step outside their comfort zone for just a little bit. I want you to think, and I want you to find somebody with whom you disagree about something. Okay? That there's one thing that you're just not in sync on. And to be curious without preconceived notions about how they got there or how this is going to benefit them, but just curious about where they're at. Doing so certainly is going to be uncomfortable. So it might be a good idea to start with something that is a smaller disagreement and get some practice in. Say you find somebody who, is Tyler still here? Where's Tyler? No, Tyler. Oh, he said home in bed? He came in with a big stain. He came tonight with a t-shirt, very nice t-shirt, but it had a big stain on it. It was a Green Bay Packer symbol. I told him he'd have to burn it. There's no way it'll come out. But just imagine you have somebody who's a very ardent fan of a team and you have another team. I want to interject something, though, very quickly here. You're going to have a conversation. You're going to have a conversation, and one thing that you want to make sure you avoid doing is using the word why. Why is a word that makes us feel defensive. Why it makes us feel like we're under attack. We're being questioned about what we think is important. Why is a question that makes it almost impossible for us to listen to what the other person is saying. We're instead thinking about how we can come back and make that person feel the same way we're feeling, kind of like we're in a position where we can't win. Instead, ask the questions what and how. So in a conversation about preferences for different sports teams, let's pretend you have a friend who's a fan of the Baltimore Orioles baseball team. And you happen to be a fan of the Washington Nationals. different leagues, communities that are close together. Pretty big rivalry. What kinds of things do you want to understand? Maybe you start with, how did you become such a big fan? What were some of the favorite memories that you have? How many games have you attended? What team does your team have a big rivalry with? And what's that all about? How many other leagues do you like in the National League? You're in the American League. It's important to listen closely, and you're listening especially for things that you didn't expect or anticipate they would say. You want to listen for areas where there's some agreement or there's some similarity. There's something in common. You want to listen for things that are shared perspectives and interests. And this is important. Before you respond with your own perspectives, your own biases, your own feelings, before you do that, please try summarizing what you heard your friend say. Make sure to ask for clarification if you aren't repeating it right. You're there to understand. Something like it sounds like you're saying, or maybe you say, do I understand correctly? When you do this, seeking to understand before being understood, it sets things off in a very positive way. First, it demonstrates that you are sincere, trying to understand where the other person's coming from. Understanding before being understood also demonstrates respect. We all want respect. That's one of the things about this ongoing, it's nice to call it a discussion. It's hardly that. These arguments that we have, we all want to be respected, but I guarantee you, you will not get respect until you give it first. And I think by asking them if you understand correctly, that's a very indirect way of saying, I want you to know, I want to try to understand where you're coming from. Also, it helps to realize that we share more things in common than we have differences. And again, most of us, it's the big things we agree about, but we forget about the big things because we're trying to set the agenda that fits what we believe. I'm betting if you take my advice, you're going to be surprised. You're going to be surprised on the different things that you agree upon, and that there is something that you can build from. Taking the initiative also sparks curiosity and interest in your perspective. A desire to understand, where are you coming from? How'd you get there? Setting aside the frustration, the exasperation, the aggravation, the vexation of those who disagree with us is not always easy. Few people I know enjoy confrontation. Those who do, I have a diagnosis for them. It may be easier if we think about it differently. If we want to understand better, if we want to have others understand us better, we want to get beyond the bickering, beyond the petty little insults, the arguments, the apathy. We have to take the initiative to understand first. Again, This is not original to me. I learned this from one of my professors in graduate school, Dr. Andre Claiborne. He's in Sioux Falls. You should meet him. He's an interesting guy. He taught me to seek to understand before being understood. And as a general reminder, we live in a democracy. People come here for a reason because we have what they call freedom, and we take that for granted. We can determine what we do, when we do it, how we do it, as long as we're not infringing upon the rights of others. But a democracy is set up so that we don't always get everything that we want. We have to work with others. We have to compromise. We not only have to maybe give up some of the things that are not as important to us, but we have to accept what's being given to us. Politics has been a part of my whole life. Most of my students know that. I talk about it all the time. My parents love to talk about ideas, and that's kind of been a major influence on me. They love to talk about different alternatives and why something they think would work better than something else, and finding common ground and moving forward. They were very sincere about it. They really enjoyed it. And there were a lot of people that they got the opportunity to work with that felt the same way. And I still believe there's a lot of us out there that really think that we can do some big things, but we've got to learn to be curious, and we have to be interested in others. In conclusion, I'm not going to keep you any longer. There are two more valuable reminders from my historian, John Meekum. By the way, read him. He's really interesting. First, and this is something that is what probably keeps us up at night. The good news is we've been here before. We've had periods where there have been extreme views on both sides, and when resolution didn't appear to be available to us. I'm talking about a guy by the name of Huey Long. Another guy, it's a bunch of guys, by the way, ladies, and you ought not to be offended that it's the guys who screw things up. There was a guy by the name of Joe McCarthy who believed that there were a lot of communists in the government. We had Richard Nixon, who thought the law was for everybody but him. We got past those things. And we did move forward. But anyway, the good news is that we have been here before. The bad news is, bad times, are nothing new in America. What is new is the reflexive assumption that the bad times are the end of times. That we've gone so far that we can't come back. BS. BS. We're going to take it back. The last thing is a series of quotes about fear as it compares to hope. Fear is about limits. Hope is about growth. Fear casts its eye warily, even shiftily, across the horizon. Hope looks up and toward the horizon. Fear points at others, assigning blame. Hope points ahead, working for the common good. Fear pushes people away. Hope pulls us together. Finally, fear divides. Hope unites. I'm not asking you just to make sure you show up on election day. I'm asking you to do something more. I'm asking you to also find people who similarly agree with you, but I'm also asking you to take the time to sit down with people that you think you have a disagreement with And get curious about that. And find areas where you can compromise. Our democracy depends on it. I want to say in closing that being a part of this community was such a wonderful experience for me. The colleagues I had were great. The students were awesome. The administration, really wonderful people. Yes, I did study psychology. I went into psychology out of politics. When I decided to go to psychology, it was after plans I had had fell apart. They didn't come true. I had an opportunity, but they didn't work. And so I tried to think of what I'm going to do, because the guy I was working for was Governor Mickelson, and he wasn't going to be governor forever, and I couldn't do the fun things I was doing forever. So I came upon psychology, and I met with George, and I said, I'm going back to school. He says, great, you're going to law school? I said, no, I'm not going to law school. You're an attorney. My father was one. I don't want to be like you. Well, what are you going to study? I said, psychology. And psychology? I said, yeah. But Gabe, all you've ever done is politics. And it's true. I mean, I don't want to bore you with the things I've gotten to do. All you've done is politics. I said, but George, politics and psychology, they're alike. And he says, how are they alike? And I said, well, you know, in psychology, you have abnormal behavior. And in politics, you have abnormal behavior. And it's true. He didn't get it. Anyway, thank you for this honor. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for the discussions we've had and learning about each other and supporting each other and encouraging one another. And I wish all of you the best. You really do come out of the top drawer. And this isn't anything I planned, by the way. I didn't plan to teach. But, you know, when you get the terminal degree, you know, they want to have you on the roster. So when they go through accreditation, they can say, wow, we got the guys with the, yeah. But I fell in love with it. Thank you. And go be the difference. See you later. Thank you. Sit down, sit down, sit down. You're all deaf. Sit down. You had to be somewhere at 6:50.
Yeah, it's so good.
No, it is. It's 7:30. Oh, God. Okay.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, I don't know.